y'all doing this evening? Again, this is Pastor O'Reilly, Pastor O, the associate pastor here at Servant Ministries at Trietsch Memorial in Flower Mound, Texas. And you're tuning in to Spill, which is, again, 15 Minutes with God. Tonight's theme is grief. And we got a special guest here, Clint Donaldson. He's a licensed professional counselor at the Center Counseling in Dallas, Texas, off Lemon Avenue, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
And if you want to watch the full 30-minute podcast interview, you can watch that at tmumc.org/spill. All right, let's jump right into it. All right, so we're talking about grief tonight, and grief is the theme, which is synonymous around holidays, and people start thinking about loved ones and friendships and relationships that may have gone sour. Can you explain to us what are some of the forms of grief that people deal with?
Yeah, so I think most people think of grief in terms of losing a loved one. So somebody dies, somebody passes away, and whether that maybe was earlier in the year or could have been years ago. When we come up to the holidays, it's like, oh, this was a time that I really remember that. So there's obviously that. But I think grief can really happen, or a grieving process happens in a lot of different forms. The loss of a relationship, breakup, divorce, the loss of a job, maybe even loss of status. So, company was doing really well, and then, nope, I get laid off, or and now I'm in a bad financial spot. I'm living somewhere that's, not where I want to live, something along those lines, and I lose status. So those are some of the different types of grief that I think people experience, and they don't realize that that's a grieving process.
Right.
Yeah.
So with those different forms and types of grief, how would you talk to someone about coping with that, right? Like what's the first step, second step, third step? What does the process look like for someone to kind of deal with that?
Yeah, typically when we think of grief, we think of 5 stages, and there's different people that have different thoughts on that, right? Like, so some people say there's 7 stages, all of that, but typically, we learn about 5 stages. So it starts with denial. So this isn't happening. Like, I don't believe this. I can't, how in the world this person can't be gone,
right?
Then we jump to anger. So they're just mad about it, right? And
that's natural.
Yeah, it is. So they start that process. And again, as I'm describing these stages, remember, it's not like a linear thing, like jumping from one step to the next step to the next. No. The third step is bargaining. So bargaining is kind of this process of saying, well, if only I could have been there, I could have, kept them from dying, which is probably ridiculous, to think through that. But those are the things that we think through. If I could have been there, it's kind of that woulda, coulda, shoulda. And then we could even bargain with God, God, if you'll just bring them back, everything will be fine. I'll do whatever you want.
Yep.
Yeah. From bargaining, we move into depression. And so again, I think most people have an understanding of what depression is, but there is a depression that goes with grief. We start to isolate more. We pull back from other people. And then depression hopefully can get us to that acceptance process. And that's usually where people can navigate their way out of the grieving process. But let me say this. It, again, like I said, it's all over the place. It's back and forth. You might find yourself in one place and then back to another, and that's all incredibly normal for grief.
Okay.
And it might last for a lot longer than you think it will. It could be 10, 15 years down the road, and at the holidays, it maybe something happens that pops up. Oh, I miss my loved one that's been gone for years and years, but it doesn't go away.
Right.
Yeah.
So I hear you saying that there are different steps to coping with grief, right? So if someone were to come into your office and say, you know what, I lost a loved one in my life. I want to talk real quick about how I'm dealing with that, but I don't want to go through that grieving process, right? I want to kind of put something on, focus on my job, start traveling, right? Not think about it, right? What would be your advice to them for that?
Yeah, I think I would want them to be able to just slow down and be a part of that process. So being mindful of where they are, the experiences that they're having, the emotions that they're feeling, maybe even physical things that are going on for them, and just stopping, pausing, and experiencing that. That's probably what I would hope to be able to get them to do initially, because it sounds like they might be trying to move on a little bit quickly.
Right. So with that being the first thing, grieving the loss of a loved one or the ending of a relationship or getting fired from a job,
Right.
Or not getting that promotion,
Right.
right, or having financial problems, right. What I have found is that when you're grieving, you have people around you.
Yeah.
Right. You
Hopefully.
have right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's look at it from the premise of having friends, family, maybe even coworkers,
Right.
and associates, and they're all around you, right? And we know that family and friends can pick up on that, right?
Yeah.
Because they know us
Right.
better than oftentimes our coworkers or mutual acquaintances that we've met, right? But in that circle, what can people do around that are directly connected to that person that's grieving?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that family or friends or coworkers or maybe just associates, what can they do for that person and when they're grieving?
I think that, again, first, more than anything else, being willing to listen. Okay, so being there for the person to listen, not trying to jump in and fix the problem. We can't fix the problem.
Amen.
Whatever
Amen.
it is, we can't fix it.
Amen.
Only God can do that.
Amen.
And so just listening, being there for them. The other thing I would suggest for any of those family members, friends, coworkers, if you know that somebody's going through, let's just say, a grieving process, anything in that category of grieving, instead of just saying like, "Hey, I'm here for you. I'm praying for you, man," or if you need something, let me know. That sometimes can put a burden on people, and so I would suggest actually giving a specific option. So like maybe, "Hey, I'm free at this time. Let's go grab coffee and we can just talk." And that way it's not putting a burden on them to say, "Oh, I've got to reach out. Now I have to reach out." You're the one that's doing the reaching out and saying, "Hey, come with me. Let's go talk. Let's hang out." Or, "Hey, I'm going to bring you a meal," or, something like that. And that's a pretty common thing, I think.
Right.
Hey, we want to serve people. We want to do any way that we can support them.
Right.
So that's what I would say is do something specific. Don't just say, "Hey, I'm praying for you," or, "Let me know if you need anything." Again, I understand the attention that they want to be helpful. I think being specific is one way that we can take the burden off of the person that's grieving.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that really for those compartments from family to friends to coworkers and to associates, just being present,
Yeah.
right, is the best thing that they can do, right? So just allowing your presence to speak and listening to them and being around whenever they need someone to be around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that, I heard you say that the last stage of grief, or one of the stages, was depression, and hopefully after depression, then they can move into a kind of like going uphill, right? Well, what if depression comes and that starts to go to a decline, and that can lead to, self mutilation, right? Which can be suicide or wanting to lash out physically at someone else, right? What needs to happen for the person who's grieving then?
Yeah, I think that's when the person that's grieving has got to seek some help. I think a lot of times people come to the church, they come to their pastor, and they want to talk, and I think that's a great place to start. And then if that's not working, seeking professional help. Those are the things that if it gets into that deep depression where they're isolating, maybe they are having suicidal thoughts, or lashing out in anger. You know, there's so many different forms that this can take. And I do think that that's something that happens. People get maybe stuck in a certain, you know, stage of grief, you know. So that's what I would say is like there needs to be, you know, some type of extra help that's coming alongside of that person.
So what's your, well, let me ask this question. Do you have any personal experiences with grief yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, obviously I have kind of the normal stuff, in terms of like, grandparents, you know, things like that. My grandfather passed away. Well, both of them have, and one actually lived with us when I was growing up. The other one I was close to. They both lived into their 90s, you know, and so there was a grieving process there. I don't find it like significant. I don't know that I got stuck in any of that necessarily. You know, years ago I was doing youth ministry. We had one of my youth and his father, they were on a motorcycle accident. And so I did their funeral, walked with the families in terms of grief, but had my own grief as well because I had a relationship with them. The thing that's really significant for me was about 15 years ago, my in-laws were getting divorced. And my wife and I were getting married at the same time. Wow. And so that was kind of a big deal. And I just remember, especially Christmas, that first Christmas after they had split up, my wife, we had this beautiful Christmas morning. We were at my parents' house. I thought everything was great. And I realized that my wife had kind of removed herself and she was crying. And just that realization that things were never going to be the same. Right. And I think that's the question with grief is trying to figure out not who am I, but who am I now? Right. You know, who am I now?
So it's almost like you're saying that grief provides a sense of introspection for the individual to see themselves for who they are, and then in turn kind of create this not really new identity, but adding on to something that has happened in their life, right? Yeah. That God's kind of giving them a notch, right? So okay. Yeah. So grief can be messy, but we have to embrace it.
Messy, yeah,
right. Yeah.
But it can be a good thing too.
Yes,
it can be good to go through that process, like you said, introspective and learning who you are and more about yourself.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. Well, we want to thank Clint Donaldson for coming out again. Again, he is a licensed counselor at the Center Counseling in Dallas, Texas, off Lemon Avenue. Go check them out if you all want to just talk to somebody or have a listening ear, right? And thank you again for tuning in to Spill, which is 15 Minutes with God. Next week, our theme will be joy versus happiness. Can we achieve joy while chasing happiness? Sounds good.